The memorial world of Remembrance circled its dim blue star in solemn silence, its surface a mosaic of white stone continents and silver oceans, engineered to reflect the sky like a patient mirror. Every structure upon it had been built to remember. The very air carried microscopic archivists, nanites that captured sound waves, preserving laughter and last words alike in crystalline vaults beneath the crust. When Queen Valora's shuttle descended through the upper atmosphere, the clouds parted not from ceremony, but from climate algorithms recognizing her biosignature. She stood as the hatch opened, her posture composed, her expression serene in the way rulers practiced before stepping into history. To any distant observer, she would seem human, elegant and tall, her features defined and calm. Only her long ears, tapering gracefully behind strands of pale silver hair, revealed her heritage. They twitched faintly as the shuttle's engines powered down, attuned to vibrations most beings could not perceive. Beneath the ceremonial armor layered across her shoulders, her pulse was steady, though not entirely tranquil. 15 years was a brief measure in the lifespan of her people, but long enough for a girl to become a queen. The terraces of Remembrance were already lined with veterans from a dozen systems. Humans in formal dark uniforms stood beside Valorian officers whose armor shimmered with embedded starlight filaments. There were prosthetic limbs polished to mirror sheen, neural implants glowing faintly beneath skin, and faces marked by both age and resilience. Overhead, translucent drones projected holographic constellations representing battles long concluded. Each star flickered with archived memories accessible by thought command. Valora descended the ramp slowly, acknowledging bows and salutes with measured nods. The weight of the crown she wore was symbolic. The real weight was expectation. She had come to honor the fallen and the living. She had come, officially, to strengthen alliances. Unofficially, she had come because a name had appeared on the registry of honored attendees 3 weeks ago. Captain Ryder Cross. Her advisors had informed her in cautious tones that records once listing him as missing in action had been amended. Reassignment, medical discharge, civilian status, alive. Alive. She had dismissed the council early that evening, retreating to her private observatory to stare at distant human trade routes until dawn. Now as she stepped onto the pale stone, the memorial's central spire activated. A column of light surged upward, forming layered holograms of past ceremonies. Her own younger image flickered briefly among them, a princess in untested armor, eyes too wide for someone who had just survived assassination. The projection glitched. Instead of a dignified portrait, a childhood archival clip replaced it. Valora at 12, attempting to command a training drone that refused to respond. The drone spun in circles while she shouted increasingly formal orders at it. By royal decree, you will rotate clockwise. The drone had rotated counterclockwise. A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the crowd. Valora stared at her younger self for half a breath, then exhaled through her nose and allowed a smile. It appears, she said as the projection corrected itself, that remembrance also preserves moments of strategic failure. The tension dissolved. Even the human delegation relaxed. She began her speech without notes. She spoke of shared sacrifice, of unity forged under fire. She described the ambush 15 years prior without naming herself as its target, recounting it as one battle among many. The stone beneath their feet shimmered faintly as the planet's empathic fields registered the solemn mood. As she spoke, her gaze moved deliberately across the assembly, and then it stopped. He stood 3 rows from the front, taller than she remembered, or perhaps simply broader in presence. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples. A subtle asymmetry marked his right shoulder, where fabric lay slightly differently against underlying reinforcement. He did not wear medals beyond the standard commemorative clasp. His posture was relaxed in a way that suggested long familiarity with both discipline and discomfort. Captain Ryder Cross did not look like a ghost. He looked tired. He looked solid. He looked alive. Valora's voice did not falter, though her long ears angled forward instinctively. She concluded the address with a formal blessing of remembrance, and the central spire responded by projecting a field of names across the sky. Applause followed, restrained but heartfelt. Protocol required her to remain upon the dais while dignitaries approached in sequence. She endured 3 ambassadors, one overly enthusiastic industrial magnate, and a veteran who insisted on showing her a holographic recreation of his squad's favorite card game. He stopped at the prescribed distance and he stopped at the prescribed distance and executed a salute that shifted midway into something less certain. His hand hovered awkwardly before lowering. "Your Majesty," he said. His voice was deeper than memory suggested, roughened slightly but unmistakable. "Captain Cross," she replied. Up close, she saw the faint scar along his jawline, the subtle metallic sheen beneath the skin near his collar, where cybernetic latticework reinforced bone. His eyes held something she had not expected: humor. "I was told," she said carefully, "that you had fallen during reassignment." He scratched the back of his neck. "I have a talent for disappointing dramatic reports." A faint smile touched her lips before she could restrain it. "It seems so." There was a pause, brief but filled with 15 years. "You look well," he offered. "My physicians will be pleased to hear that." "And your engineers," he added. "Your ships look significantly less likely to explode than they did back then." She allowed a soft laugh. "That is largely because you are no longer present in the hangars." He feigned offense. "In my defense, that reactor malfunction was already unstable. You connected the polarity conduits with a ration heater. It was an innovative solution. It was on fire." He inclined his head slightly. "Temporarily." A nearby Valorian officer attempted and failed to suppress a grin. The exchange was light, almost absurd in its normalcy. Yet beneath it ran an undercurrent neither addressed. Valora's memory overlaid the present, plasma fire streaking across night skies, the impact of a body colliding with hers, the sensation of being driven to the ground as energy bolts struck armor that was not hers. She remembered the smell of scorched fabric. She remembered silence where his voice should have been. "I believed you dead," she said quietly, the humor thinning but not vanishing entirely. Ryder's expression softened. "I was informed you survived," he replied. "Seemed a fair trade." Her ears angled slightly downward. "It was not a trade I consented to." "Good," he said, "because if you'd tried to argue with me about it at the time, we both would have been vaporized." Despite herself, she laughed again. The sound felt unfamiliar and necessary. The memorial's light shifted subtly around them, reacting to emotional variance. Valora became aware of the watching crowd, of advisors calculating optics, of historians already annotating the moment. "This is not a conversation suited to ceremony," she said. "No," he agreed. "It usually involves less polished stone and more debris." She stepped down from the dais before protocol could protest. Gasps moved through the nearest officials as she closed the distance between them fully. "Walk with me, Captain," she said. He hesitated only a fraction before falling into step beside her. They moved toward the quieter edge of the terrace where bioluminescent trees shimmered softly. Behind them, the ceremony resumed its formal cadence. Ahead of them, memory archives glowed beneath translucent flooring. For a moment, neither spoke. Valora felt the weight of crown and past and possibility all at once. She had imagined this meeting in countless variations: dramatic, tragic, silent. She had not imagined that he would make jokes about reactor fires. "I must confess," she said at last, "I did not expect our reunion to begin with accusations of arson." Ryder's mouth curved faintly. "If it helps, I've retired from explosive innovation." "I am relieved to hear it." They slowed near the garden's threshold. Above them, the blue star burned steadily, reflected in the silver ocean beyond the terraces. The memorial world recorded their footsteps, storing the sound alongside millions of others. 15 years ago, he had shielded her with his body. Now they stood side by side, not princess and soldier, but queen and man, both altered by time. "Captain Cross," she said softly, the title both formal and deeply personal. "Welcome back." He met her gaze without flinching. "It's good to see you alive, Valora." For the first time that day, she allowed herself to simply breathe. The garden at the edge of the terrace was designed not for spectacle, but for honesty. The trees there had been grown from bioengineered memory vines, their translucent leaves threaded with faint veins of light. When wind passed through them, they whispered fragments of archived voices, laughter, fragments of vows, the distant cadence of names spoken long ago. It was a place where the past did not shout. It murmured. Valora dismissed her attendants with a subtle gesture. The hovering drones that had followed at a respectful distance retreated, their lenses dimming as they shifted to perimeter watch. The air cooled slightly as the memorial world adjusted environmental variables for privacy. Ryder glanced upward at the nearest tree as it flickered faintly. If that thing starts replaying my worst tactical decisions, I'm leaving, he said. It will not, Valora replied. The archives require consent. That's unfortunate. I was hoping to blame the trees for my reputation. She folded her hands behind her back, studying him openly now that ceremony no longer shielded them. The lines at the corners of his eyes had deepened. His stance favored his left side in subtle increments. Weight distribution recalibrated by habit. The fabric of his jacket shifted slightly when he moved, revealing the faint geometric contour of cybernetic reinforcement beneath his skin. You were injured more severely than reports indicated, she said. Reports are written by optimists, he answered, or by people who've never tried walking after a plasma burst rearranges your skeletal priorities. She did not smile at that. Does it pain you? Only when I move, he replied lightly, or stand, or exist in moderate gravity. She gave him a look that would have silenced an entire council chamber. He lifted both hands in surrender. It's manageable. The lattice work does most of the heavy lifting. Human engineers are stubborn. We refuse to let broken things stay broken. And yet, she said quietly, you vanished. He exhaled through his nose, gaze drifting toward the silver horizon, where the ocean met the sky in seamless reflection. Reassignment orders came down 2 days after the ambush. High Command decided proximity to the future queen might be politically inconvenient. Her ears angled slightly backward. You were removed. Relocated, he corrected gently, to a quiet little outpost where the most dangerous thing I faced was boredom. Turns out boredom is lethal to a career. She considered that in silence. You did not attempt contact. Ryder glanced at her. Your advisors made it clear that correspondence from decorated human soldiers would be interpreted. Interpreted how? As a leverage, or weakness, or scandal. Depends on the day. A faint pulse of amber light moved through the leaves above them as the memorial field registered heightened emotion. Valora turned away, pacing slowly along the curved pathway. The stone beneath their feet glowed faintly with each step, recording pressure patterns, preserving presence. I searched casualty lists, she said, repeatedly. Your name appeared in preliminary tallies. I was listed as critical, then classified, then misplaced. He offered a crooked smile. I've always had trouble with paperwork. She stopped walking. Do not reduce this to clerical incompetence. He held her gaze. The humor softened but did not disappear. If I don't reduce it, it grows teeth. That silenced her more effectively than defiance. They resumed walking, slower now. A cluster of veterans passed at a respectful distance. One elderly Valorian with mechanical wings saluted Ryder casually. You have admirers, Valora observed. He lost a bet, Ryder said. I told him his wings would never pass inspection. The mechanical appendages emitted a faint metallic chirp, as if in protest. A thin smile returned to her lips. They reached a circular platform at the garden center. Embedded within it was a harmonic console, its surface rippling faintly with energy. The memorial world's orbit was stabilized by quantum anchors tuned to specific frequency patterns. Veterans often placed their hands upon the console, allowing it to map neural resonance and weave their emotional signatures into the planet's archival matrix. Ryder eyed it warily. Does it bite? It listens, Valora replied. That sounds worse. She stepped onto the platform and placed her palm against the luminous surface. The console responded immediately, threads of pale light spiraling upward around her arm. Her long ears angled forward as the resonance field calibrated. Ryder hesitated, then stepped beside her. He removed his gloves slowly, revealing faint scarring along his wrist where circuitry met flesh. He pressed his hand against the console. The reaction was immediate and unexpected. The platform flared with brilliant gold, then steadied into a layered intertwining of blue and silver frequencies. The surrounding trees brightened, leaves shimmering like captured starlight. A low harmonic tone vibrated through the air, not discordant, but complex. Ryder blinked. I assume that's not standard? Valora's voice was quiet. No. The console projected a holographic overlay above them, a fragmented replay of the ambush 15 years earlier. Plasma fire streaked across a dark sky. A younger Valora, armor scorched, eyes wide, stood exposed. A human figure lunged into frame, shoving her aside as energy bolts struck. The projection froze at the instant of impact. Ryder winced slightly. I'd forgotten how dramatic that looked. You shielded me with no hesitation. I was closer to the danger. It was basic geometry. You fractured your spine. He shrugged faintly. Spines are overrated. She turned to him fully. You nearly died. And you did not, he said simply. Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. The console dimmed, the projection dissolving into particles of light that drifted upward and vanished. Valora removed her hand first. The glow faded gradually. You risked everything, she said, for a princess you had met only hours before. Ryder flexed his fingers, as if reacquainting them with ordinary sensation. You weren't just a princess. No? You were terrified, he replied softly, and trying very hard not to show it. Her breath caught almost imperceptibly. He looked at the console rather than at her. I've seen that expression before. On rookies, on commanders, on myself. When you're the one everyone expects to stand unshaken. The wind shifted, carrying a faint echo of distant applause from the terrace. I told myself, she said slowly, that your sacrifice obligated me to become worthy of it. Ryder's mouth curved faintly. That sounds exhausting. It was. You don't owe me a personality upgrade, Valora. She studied him, searching for irony. There was none. What do I owe you then? She asked. He considered the question with exaggerated seriousness. At minimum, a tour of that absurdly large capital ship in orbit. I've been staring at it all morning. Despite herself, she laughed again, the sound lighter than before. You risked your life for interstellar security and your demand is tourism? I have simple tastes. You have audacious ones. Only on alternate Thursdays. She shook her head slightly, amusement easing the tightness in her chest. The memorial's harmonic tone shifted subtly as distant subsystems recalibrated. Overhead, a formation of maintenance drones glided across the sky in silent coordination. You never returned to active service, she said. Medical board decided I was better suited for advisory roles. Turns out I'm bad at sitting behind desks. I told one admiral his battle plan had the strategic elegance of a collapsing shed. And how did he respond? He assigned me to inventory logistics. A faint smile touched her expression again. You are fortunate to be alive. Frequently inconvenient, but yes. They stepped off the platform together. For a moment the world felt narrower, focused entirely on the space between them. The years of absence, the assumptions of death, the silent gratitude carried like armor. All of it hovered unresolved. Valora drew a steady breath. Walk with me further, she said. There is more you should see. Ryder inclined his head. Lead the way, Your Majesty. She paused, then said gently, Valora. He held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Valora, he repeated. They moved deeper into the garden, where the trees grew taller and the archived whispers softened to near silence. Behind them, Remembrance continued its patient orbit, recording their steps, their voices, the subtle recalibration of two lives intersecting again after 15 years apart. The deeper garden gave way to a quiet overlook where the polished stone thinned into a translucent platform suspended above the silver sea. Beneath their feet, faint currents of light moved like slow constellations trapped in water. The memorial world's ocean was not entirely liquid. It was a suspension of reflective nanofluid that recorded atmospheric shifts and encoded them into long-term archives. Even the tides remembered. Ryder stopped near the edge and peered downward. If I fall in, he said, am I preserved for eternity? Only your outline, Valora replied. The planet prefers to archive dignity. That's unfortunate. I've misplaced most of mine. She stepped beside him, close enough that her shoulder nearly brushed his. The breeze carried the scent of ionized air in distant circuitry. Her long ears tilted slightly toward him, catching the subtle rhythm of his breathing. "For 15 years," she said quietly, "I carried the image of you as you were that night, unmoving." Ryder's gaze remained on the shifting light below. "I carried the image of you standing after the blast," he answered, still issuing orders while half the command structure was unconscious. "I was improvising. You were commanding." A faint ripple of gold passed through the ocean beneath them as the memorial's empathic field registered resonance between their neural signatures. Ryder noticed and raised an eyebrow. "It does that when conversations get meaningful, doesn't it?" "Yes," he exhaled slowly. "Then we should probably say something trivial." She considered that. "Your uniform is poorly pressed." He looked down at himself. "It survived 3 cargo transfers and a reunion with royalty. I consider that a triumph. Your standards have declined." "They've adapted." Silence settled again, but this time it felt less fragile. From the horizon, a transport shuttle approached, its hull reflecting the blue star in fractured segments. The capital ship in orbit adjusted slightly, vast and luminous, its engines humming at sub-audible frequencies. Quantum-sung cores vibrated within its hull, stabilizing gravitational differentials with harmonic precision. Ryder glanced upward. "That's yours?" "It belongs to the crown." "Which is you." "Technically, it belongs to the people." "Do they know it can sing?" "It resonates." "That's a fancy word for singing." A faint smile curved her lips. "You intend to critique my flagship?" "I intend to admire it loudly until someone gives me a tour." "You are persistent." "I survived out of spite." She turned toward him fully. "You survived because you refused to yield." "That too," he admitted. A flicker of tension passed through his expression, almost imperceptible. His right hand flexed involuntarily, as if memory pulsed along old nerve pathways. Valora noticed. "Show me," she said gently. He hesitated. "Show you what?" "The injury. It's not ceremonial. Neither is survival." He held her gaze for a long moment, then slowly unfastened the clasp at his collar. The fabric shifted, revealing the faint lattice of metallic reinforcement beneath translucent skin along his shoulder and upper chest. The cybernetic framework was elegant but unyielding, a web of silver threads integrated with bone. The plasma impact shattered the clavicle, 3 ribs, and part of the scapula, he said matter-of-factly. They replaced what they couldn't repair. Her fingers hovered a fraction of an inch from the latticework but did not touch. "Does it respond to neural commands?" "Mostly. Sometimes it argues." "It argues. Locks up when the weather changes. I suspect it dislikes humidity." She exhaled softly. "You joke." "If I don't, I start counting what doesn't move the way it used to." The breeze shifted again. Colder now. Valora lowered her hand. "You should not have been left alone with that recovery." "I wasn't alone," he replied. "I had an entire medical team telling me to stop attempting push-ups." "That is not what I meant." He understood anyway. "I didn't come back," he said quietly, "because I didn't want you to see this and think your throne was built on something broken." Her long ears angled sharply forward, a rare sign of intensity. "My throne was built on choice. Your choice." "Exactly. You think I would regret it?" "I think you'd blame yourself." She did not answer immediately. Below them, the ocean's light shifted into softer blues, mirroring the sky. "I have blamed myself," she said at last. "Not for your injury, for believing you dead, for allowing myself to grieve you in silence rather than question the report." Ryder let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it carried less weight. "You were 19 and nearly assassinated. I think you're allowed a dramatic reaction." "I became queen within the year." "That doesn't make you less 19. The statement lingered between them. From the distant terrace, a surge of applause rose briefly before fading. The ceremony continued without them. Ryder straightened his collar, refastening the clasp with practiced ease. "I heard you negotiated the Trinary Accords." "I did. They said you dismantled a blockade with nothing but a speech and a threat to embargo luxury exports. I may have implied certain economic inconveniences. Ruthless, pragmatic, He studied her with open admiration. You grew into something formidable. She tilted her head slightly. You sound surprised. I'm impressed. Her gaze softened. You expected less? I expected someone hardened by what happened, not someone who turned it into policy. She considered that carefully. You were the first human I ever truly spoke to. I said 3 sentences. They were decisive sentences. 2 of them involved ducking. Effective advice. He smiled faintly. A faint tremor passed through the platform beneath their feet, subtle but distinct. Ryder's posture shifted instantly, instinct overriding reflection. His stance widened slightly, weight redistributing to compensate. Valora felt it as well. Orbital adjustment, she said, though her tone carried inquiry. Ryder scanned the horizon automatically. That didn't feel routine. A cluster of maintenance drones accelerated across the sky, their flight paths deviating from symmetrical patterns. The capital ship above emitted a low harmonic note that resonated through the air like distant thunder. Valora tapped a command into the interface embedded within her wristband. A translucent display flared to life between them, projecting streams of data. Minor fluctuation in stabilizer output, she read, within acceptable parameters. Ryder leaned closer to the display. Acceptable to who? To the engineers. That's rarely reassuring. She gave him a pointed look. You distrust professionals? I distrust the word minor. The tremor did not repeat. The drones resumed standard formation. Valora dismissed the display, though her expression remained thoughtful. You still assess threat vectors automatically, she observed. I'd apologize, but I'm not sure how to turn it off. Do not. He met her eyes. I am relieved you have not changed entirely, she said. He considered that, then allowed a small grin. I was worried you had. She raised an eyebrow. Into what? A statue. She glanced down at the luminous platform. Remembrance is already full of those. Exactly. For a moment they stood in companionable silence, watching light drift beneath them. Valora, he said after a while, the humor thinning into something steadier. Why did you truly ask me to walk with you? She did not answer immediately. Her gaze moved across the sea, across the sky, across the distant capital ship, whose engines hummed like restrained power. Because, she said at last, I needed to see whether the memory I carried was real, or whether I had constructed you into something impossible. And? She turned toward him fully, studying the man before her. Not the frozen image in plasma-lit smoke, but the one who stood breathing beside her. You are not impossible, she said softly. You are inconveniently real. He let out a quiet laugh. That may be the kindest insult I've ever received. It was not intended as insult. I'll take it anyway. The wind lifted slightly, stirring her silver hair. Her long ears caught the sound of his heartbeat, steady despite the subtle strain beneath it. 15 years ago, he had thrown himself into fire without hesitation. Now they stood on a world built from memory, uncertain whether the past bound them or simply brought them here. In orbit, the capital ship adjusted its position once more, its harmonic core resonating faintly through the atmosphere. Ryder glanced upward again. You're sure that fluctuation was minor? Valora followed his gaze, her expression sharpening almost imperceptibly. For now, she said. The tremor did not return, but neither did the easy stillness that had settled between them. The capital ship in orbit shifted its position again, this time with visible deliberation. Its vast hull caught the light of the blue star and refracted it in thin prisms that skimmed across the ocean below. Ryder watched the movement with narrowed eyes. That's not a sightseeing maneuver. No, Valora said quietly. It is aligning with Remembrance's equatorial anchor. For routine diagnostics? For recalibration. That sounds suspiciously similar to minor fluctuation. She ignored the comment and activated the wrist interface again. Data cascaded across the translucent field between them. Orbital vectors, energy harmonics, anchor stability ratios. Her long ears angled forward as she absorbed the shifting variables. Ryder leaned closer, reading the display upside down with casual familiarity. Anchor 3 is lagging. It is within tolerance. It is trending downward. She did not argue that point. Above them, a formation of security interceptors detached from the capital ship and formed a slow perimeter arc. The memorial world's climate systems compensated for the atmospheric displacement with a subtle change in pressure. Valora exhaled slowly. "We will board the flagship." Ryder blinked. "We will? You wished for a tour. I was hoping for one that didn't involve potential gravitational failure. You prefer predictable experiences? I prefer experiences that do not include becoming a permanent footnote in planetary debris." She gave him a level look. "If Remembrance destabilizes, the footnote will be extensive." "That's not comforting." She stepped back from the overlook, posture straightening into something unmistakably regal. "Captain Cross," he instinctively shifted into formal stance. "I require your assessment aboard my flagship." His brow lifted slightly. "As what exactly?" "As someone who distrusts the word minor." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You're promoting me on impulse. I am consulting experience. Dangerous habit. I have survived worse." They moved swiftly now, the earlier quiet replaced by purposeful momentum. The path back toward the main terrace curved through luminous trees whose leaves dimmed as they passed, sensing elevated neural activity. A pair of Valorian guards fell into step behind them without instruction. When they reached the central plaza, the ceremony was still in progress. Holographic constellations shimmered overhead while an elderly human veteran recited a poem into the memorial's archive. The crowd did not immediately notice the Queen's departure. Ryder glanced sideways at her. "You're leaving mid-ceremony. My absence will be interpreted as strategic necessity. And if it's not, then it will be interpreted as mystery." He huffed softly. "You've gotten good at this." She did not answer. A shuttle detached from the terrace docking platform as they approached, its hull sleek and iridescent. The hatch opened before they reached it. Inside, the cabin hummed with controlled gravity stabilizers. As the hatch sealed, the shuttle lifted smoothly into the air. Through the viewport, Remembrance receded into a luminous curve of white stone and silver ocean. Ryder folded his arms loosely across his chest. "For the record, I did mean it about the tour." "You will have it. With snacks?" She glanced at him. "It is a human expectation. I will instruct the galley to prioritize survival over refreshments." He nodded solemnly. "Wise." The shuttle pierced the upper atmosphere, transitioning into orbital ascent. The capital ship loomed ahead, vast, layered in interlocking segments that shimmered faintly with harmonic energy. Its core thrummed at a frequency that resonated faintly in Ryder's chest, not painful but insistent. "That sound," he murmured. "It is the quantum sung core," Valora said. "It stabilizes gravitational variance by resonating against stellar flux. And it's slightly off-key." Her gaze flicked toward him sharply. "Explain." He tilted his head, listening more than looking. "I spent 3 years stationed near a prototype harmonic array on Epsilon Ridge. When the frequency drifted, you could feel it before instruments registered it. The shuttle docked with seamless precision. The hatch opened into a corridor of polished alloy and embedded light filaments that pulsed in synchronized rhythm. Crew members bowed as Valora stepped through. Ryder followed, acutely aware of the shift in atmosphere. This was not a memorial garden. This was a warship disguised as diplomacy. A senior engineer approached, her expression composed but strained. "Your Majesty, Anchor 3's output has decreased by 0.8% over the last hour." "That exceeds minor," Ryder muttered under his breath. Valora gestured subtly for him to continue. The engineer hesitated only a fraction before addressing him directly. "Captain Cross." "Retired," he corrected. "Captain," she repeated diplomatically. "We believe a harmonic interference pattern is emerging from the lower anchor lattice." "External?" Ryder asked. "Uncertain." Valora stepped forward. "Take us to the core." They moved quickly through corridors that curved in subtle arcs, designed to distribute structural stress evenly. The harmonic hum grew stronger as they descended via a transparent lift shaft. Outside the shaft walls, layers of energy conduits pulsed in luminous strands like veins carrying starlight. Ryder shifted his weight as the lift decelerated. His right shoulder stiffened briefly, and he rolled it once to compensate. Valora noticed but did not comment. The core chamber opened before them, vast, circular, and filled with suspended rings of rotating crystalline arrays. At the center hovered the quantum sung core itself, a sphere of condensed energy wrapped in intersecting magnetic fields. It emitted a layered tone that vibrated through bone. Ryder closed his eyes briefly, listening. "There," he said. The engineer frowned. "We have recalibrated twice." "It's not the core," he replied. "It's the feedback from the anchor." Valora stepped closer to the observation rail. "Could this be sabotage?" The engineer hesitated. "There are no breach indicators." Ryder opened his eyes. "You don't need a breach to create interference. You just need a signal." Valora's gaze sharpened. "From where?" He turned slowly, scanning the chamber. "Somewhere inside your own network." The harmonic tone dipped slightly, then rose again, unstable for a fraction of a second. Crew members exchanged tense glances. Valora's voice remained steady. "Is Remembrance in danger?" "Not yet," the engineer said carefully, "but if the anchor destabilizes further, the orbital variance will increase," Ryder finished, "and your memorial world becomes a very poetic meteor." A few crew members stared at him. He lifted a hand. "I'm not wrong." Valora considered the core, the ship, the world below filled with veterans and archived memories. "Trace the interference," she ordered. Engineers dispersed to their stations. Data streams flared to life around the chamber, holographic schematics mapping anchor connections and harmonic flows. Ryder stepped beside her at the rail. "You really know how to stage a reunion. You prefer simplicity? I prefer conversations that don't include gravitational collapse." She allowed the faintest hint of a smile. "You said you survived out of spite." "Yes." "Then apply it." He huffed quietly. "Your Majesty commands spite." Noted. Below them, the core pulsed again, slightly uneven. Valora's long ears angled forward, catching a faint distortion layered beneath the harmonic hum. "Captain," she said softly. "Valora," he corrected without looking at her. She accepted it. "Do you hear it?" He listened again, more carefully this time. "Tuning your anchor," he said. "The tuning your anchor," he said. The distortion in the harmonic field did not announce itself loudly. It threaded through the core's resonance like a second voice attempting to sing the same note half a breath too late. Subtle, intentional. Valora did not raise her voice. "Lock down internal transmissions. Isolate anchor 3 from non-essential networks." The engineers moved immediately, fingers sweeping through holographic control arrays. Translucent panels reconfigured, narrowing the flow of data. The quantum sung core pulsed brighter as its magnetic lattice adjusted. Ryder leaned both hands on the observation rail, eyes fixed on the rotating, crystalline rings. "Who has clearance to modulate anchor frequencies from inside your own system?" "Senior engineers. Strategic command." "The Crown," Valora replied. "So either someone with clearance is very creative," he said, "or someone borrowed it." The engineer closest to them swallowed. "There are no unauthorized access flags." "That doesn't mean there's no unauthorized access," Ryder answered calmly. "It means whoever's doing it doesn't want you to know." Valora tapped into her neural interface, her pupils contracting briefly as streams of encrypted diagnostics fed directly into her cognition. Her long ears angled forward, catching micro-fluctuations in the harmonic field. "There," she murmured. The distortion spiked again, barely perceptible. Ryder straightened. "It's a pulse, patterned." The engineer overlaid the waveform projection above the core. At first glance, it looked like natural variance. Then the repetition became visible, a fractional deviation recurring at fixed intervals. "That's not random drift," Ryder said. "That's someone nudging the system until it drifts for them." "To what end?" Valora asked. He gave her a dry look. "When you destabilize a memorial world dedicated to interspecies unity during a veteran ceremony, the end is rarely subtle." A quiet tension moved through the chamber. Valora's expression hardened. "Trace the source." "We are attempting," the engineer replied. "The signal appears embedded within maintenance subroutines." "Of course it does," Ryder muttered. "Hide the knife in the toolbox." The harmonic tone dipped again, lower this time, resonating uncomfortably through the deck plating. A few crew members shifted their footing instinctively. Valora opened a secure channel. Remembrance command, report anchor 3 stability. The response came almost instantly. Minor oscillation, Your Majesty. Within. Ryder coughed pointedly. Within revised tolerance, the voice corrected. Valora's gaze did not waver. Prepare emergency decoupling protocols. There was a pause. Decoupling would interrupt ceremony transmissions. That is acceptable. Ryder glanced sideways at her. You're willing to cut your own broadcast. I am willing to prevent a planetary impact. Fair. The engineer's console flared bright. We've identified a microtransmission piggybacking on diagnostic pings. It originates from inside the ship. Location, Valora demanded. The holographic schematic zoomed inward, isolating a corridor 2 decks below. Ryder exhaled slowly. That's uncomfortably close. Valora turned toward the lift shaft. Security teams will intercept. He caught her sleeve lightly, not restraining, just steadying. If it's someone with clearance, they'll have anticipated that. You suggest we do nothing? I suggest we don't announce ourselves. She studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded once. Engineer, reroute decoupling through manual override. Delay execution by 90 seconds. The engineer hesitated only briefly. Understood. Ryder moved toward the lift. If we're going down there, we should look like we're not. Valora glanced at her ceremonial armor. He tilted his head. You do have something less conspicuous? She tapped a command. The armor's outer plating retracted seamlessly into compact segments along her spine, leaving a fitted underlayer woven with reactive shielding filaments. Ryder blinked. Convenient. I do not attend memorials unprepared. Noted. I feel underdressed. You are. They entered the lift without escort. The doors sealed and the shaft descended in near silence. Outside the transparent walls, conduits pulsed with light in rhythmic waves. Ryder rolled his right shoulder once, loosening tension. I assume you're aware this is an exceptionally dramatic way to reconnect? You prefer subtler circumstances? I prefer coffee. You are difficult. I've been told. The lift halted. The doors slid open onto a corridor lit in cool blue. Maintenance panels lined the walls, each marked with identification codes. The hum of the core was stronger here, layered with faint mechanical clicks. Valora extended her senses through the ship's internal network, mapping movement signatures. One biosignature ahead, she said quietly. Authorized. Of course, Ryder murmured. They advanced without haste. The corridor curved slightly, narrowing sightlines. At the far end, a figure stood near an open panel, back turned, fingers moving rapidly across a compact interface. Ryder slowed. You recognize them? Valora's eyes narrowed. Lieutenant Saran, Harmonic Systems. Trusted? She was. The harmonic distortion pulsed again, stronger. Valora stepped forward into full view. Lieutenant. Saran turned sharply, surprise flashing across her features before discipline replaced it. Your Majesty, I was conducting recalibration. Without reporting variance? Valora asked evenly. It was within minor thresholds. Ryder coughed softly. Saran's gaze flicked toward him. Captain Cross. Retired, he corrected again. Her jaw tightened. Valora's voice remained steady. Explain the embedded pulse in Anchor 3's feedback loop. Saran hesitated a fraction too long. It is a corrective modulation, she said finally. The anchor was drifting. In a direction that benefits whom? Ryder asked. Saran's eyes flashed. Benefits stability. By destabilizing ceremony orbit, he countered. Valora stepped closer, her presence filling the corridor. Lieutenant, you will disengage the modulation now. Saran's fingers hovered over the interface. With respect, Your Majesty, long-term stability requires short-term variance. That sounds like justification, Ryder said quietly. Saran looked at him sharply. You are human. Yes. You do not understand the fragility of our orbital lattice. He tilted his head. I understand fragility very well. The harmonic pulse intensified, vibrating faintly through the floor. Valora's long ears angled forward sharply. Disengage. Saran's expression hardened. Your Majesty, the interspecies alliance weakens us. Remembrance is a symbol of that dilution. Ryder blinked. Ah. Valora did not flinch. You would endanger this world to prove a philosophical objection? I would recalibrate it, Saran said. Into a falling trajectory? Ryder asked lightly. Bold strategy. Saran's hand tightened on the interface. Valora moved without raising her voice. Manual override. Back in the core chamber, the delayed decoupling protocol activated. The ship's systems shifted with a sharp harmonic surge. The modulation signal fractured mid-pulse. The corridor lights flickered. Saran gasped as the interface in her hand sparked and died. On the deck above, the quantum sung core stabilized abruptly, its tone returning to steady resonance. Ryder exhaled. That's better. Security teams rounded the corridor bend at last, weapons lowered but ready. Saran looked from Valora to Ryder, something like disbelief flickering in her eyes. You would protect them, she said softly. Valora's voice did not rise. I will protect all under my crown. Saran's shoulders slumped. The harmonic hum steadied fully. Ryder glanced at Valora. Remind me, he said lightly, is this where you banish me for bringing excitement to your ceremony? She met his gaze, the faintest curve touching her lips. On the contrary. Security escorted Saran away. The corridor fell quiet again, save for the steady pulse of the ship's restored resonance. Ryder rolled his shoulder once more. Well, that was invigorating. You define invigorating unusually. I try to maintain consistency. Valora studied him for a long moment. You trusted me, he said, tone softer now. I required your assessment, she replied. That's not what I meant. She held his gaze. The ship around them hummed in balanced harmony, the threat contained for now. Far below, Remembrance continued its patient orbit, unaware of how close it had come to catastrophe. Ryder let out a slow breath. For the record, he added, I still expect snacks. Valora's laughter echoed softly down the corridor, bright and unexpected against the steady rhythm of restored stability. The quantum-sung core settled into a steady resonance that vibrated through the ship like a deep measured breath. In the wake of the attempted modulation, the crew moved with quiet efficiency, running diagnostics and sealing security loops. The crisis had lasted minutes. The implications would echo longer. Valora stood in the observation gallery overlooking the core, her hands resting lightly on the transparent rail. The light from the rotating, crystalline rings washed over her features in shifting bands of silver and blue. Without the ceremonial armor, she seemed less distant, though the weight of command remained in the straight line of her shoulders. Ryder leaned back against a support column a few steps away. He had finally accepted a nutrient packet from a passing technician and was studying it with suspicion. You saved a memorial world, he said, turning the packet over. And this is my reward? It contains complete caloric balance, she replied without looking at him. It contains paste. Efficient paste. He sighed and tore it open anyway. For the record, human gratitude customs involve better texture. You will submit a formal request to the galley. I might. Silence followed, but it was no longer strained. The immediate threat had passed. The ship's systems were stable. Remembrance continued its orbit below, its ceremony likely unaware of how narrowly it had avoided disaster. Ryder pushed away from the column and approached the rail beside her. For a moment, they simply watched the core's rhythmic glow. You hesitated, he said quietly. She did not ask what he meant. When? In the corridor, before you ordered the override. She exhaled slowly. She was one of my finest harmonic engineers. And you still pulled the lever. Yes, he nodded once. That's not easy. No, she agreed. The light from the core shifted slightly, reflecting in her eyes. Her long ears angled subtly toward him, attentive even when her gaze remained forward. I have ruled through famine, blockade, and insurrection, she said after a moment. Yet betrayal from within feels, more intimate. Ryder considered that. It is. You speak from experience. I've seen units fracture over ideology, he replied. It's rarely about the surface argument. It's about fear. She feared dilution of our identity and chose destruction to prevent it, he said. Irony has a dark sense of humor. Valora's lips curved faintly. You find humor in this. I find humor in everything, he answered. If I stop, I start remembering hospital ceilings. She turned toward him fully now. You never told me, she said, how long you were confined. He shifted his weight slightly, the subtle stiffness in his right shoulder returning for a brief moment. 8 months in medical suspension, 6 more in physical rehabilitation, 3 after that pretending I was ready. And were you? No, he said simply, but the universe rarely waits for readiness. She studied him in silence. The scars were mostly hidden, integrated with precision technology, but the effort of adaptation lingered in the way he stood. I would have visited, she said. He gave her a faint, crooked smile. You were being crowned. I would have visited, and caused a diplomatic uproar, he countered gently. The newly crowned queen crossing half the sector to sit beside an injured human soldier? Headlines would have combusted. She did not smile. I told myself, he continued, tone lighter, that you had larger things to carry. I did, she said, but that does not erase what you carried. The core's hum deepened slightly as final recalibrations locked into place. A diagnostic chime sounded faintly in the chamber. Ryder glanced upward. Your engineers are good. They are, she said, and yet one nearly altered a world. He nodded. People are complicated. You simplify that statement. It helps. They fell into silence again, this one less about tension and more about recognition. The years between them were not gone, but they felt less like a canyon and more like a bridge under construction. Valora stepped away from the rail. Walk with me. He tilted his head slightly. We seem to be doing that often. I find it clarifying. I find it dangerous. She raised an eyebrow. I might start enjoying it, he clarified. They left the core chamber and moved through quieter corridors, away from the hum of machinery. The ship's inner sections were lined with observation windows that revealed the curve of Remembrance below. From this height, the memorial world looked serene, untouched by conflict. They will ask questions, Ryder said as they walked. About the modulation? About us. She did not slow. There is no us to question. He studied her profile. Isn't there? Her steps faltered only a fraction. There is gratitude and shared history. Yes, and a tendency to nearly die in proximity. That is statistically inaccurate. He gave her a sideways glance. Twice as a pattern. She exhaled something that might have been a restrained laugh. They stopped before a wide viewport overlooking the star. The blue light bathed them in cool illumination. I avoided returning, he said at last, his voice quieter now. Not because of politics, because I didn't know who I would be to you. She did not look away from the star. You feared I would see only the soldier who fell. I feared you'd see the one who didn't get back up the same. She turned then, meeting his gaze directly. I see the man who stands before me. And what is he? He asked. Changed, she said, but not diminished. The words hung between them, simple and unadorned. Ryder let out a slow breath. You've become very good with speeches. That was not a speech? No, he agreed. It wasn't. The ship's internal lights dimmed slightly as evening cycle protocols engaged. Below, Remembrance glowed faintly against the darkening sky. I do not know what this is, she said softly. Between us. Neither do I, he replied, and I'm remarkably uncomfortable with ambiguity. You prefer orders. I prefer clarity. She considered that carefully. Clarity may require time. I have some, he said lightly, assuming we avoid additional planetary sabotage. She almost smiled. You assume we will not. I assume you will prevent it. And you? I'll complain about it. A faint warmth entered her expression. He stepped closer, not enough to invade space, but enough that the distance felt intentional rather than accidental. You don't owe me, he said quietly. Not a throne, not a future. She held his gaze, her long ears angled forward in attentive stillness. I know, she replied. The answer was steady, without hesitation. For a moment neither moved. The star's light reflected in the viewport, casting overlapping silhouettes across the floor. Ryder cleared his throat lightly. For the record, I am still technically retired. Are you? My shoulder votes yes. And the rest of you? He considered that, then gave a half smile. Undecided. She nodded slowly. Then perhaps we will both remain undecided. That sounds dangerously mutual. It is. He looked at her for a long moment, something unspoken settling into a quieter understanding. Outside, the capital ship maintained its steady orbit. Remembrance turned below, its archives preserving another day. Ryder exhaled softly. So, he said, tone returning to faint levity, about that tour. Valora's eyes flicked toward him, amused despite herself. You have already seen the core. I was hoping for something less explosive. There is a viewing deck above the forward arrays. Does it involve snacks? She paused, then said, perhaps. His grin returned, subtle but genuine. They turned together toward the corridor, the tension of crisis replaced by something more complex. No longer debt, not yet defined, but undeniably present. The ship's harmonic hum followed them, steady and balanced, as if the universe itself had decided, for now, to remain in tune. The veteran's ceremony resumed beneath a sky that had nearly held catastrophe and instead held quiet light. From orbit, the capital ship glided into a ceremonial position, its hull reflecting the blue star in long arcs of silver fire. Remembrance shimmered below, unaware of how close its orbit had tilted toward ruin. Valora returned to the terrace not in armor, but in the simpler woven underlayer that marked both authority and humility. The crowd noticed immediately. Whispers moved like wind through tall grass. Beside her walked Ryder Cross, not in uniform, not in disguise, simply present. The memorial spire activated again as she stepped onto the dais. This time, no projection glitched. The sky filled with names, human, Valorian, allied species, etched in light across the firmament. Valora raised her hand, and the murmurs stilled. Remembrance stands, she began, her voice amplified gently through atmospheric transmitters, because vigilance does not end with war. She did not recount the sabotage in detail. She did not name Saran with condemnation. Instead, she spoke of fragility and choice, of how unity must be defended not only from enemies beyond the horizon, but from fear within it. Today, she said, we honor those who stood when it was easier to fall. Her gaze shifted briefly toward Ryder. 15 years ago, during an ambush meant to fracture an alliance before it could begin, a human soldier made a decision. He did not calculate political advantage. He did not weigh long-term consequence. He acted. The sky above shifted, and the memorial's archives projected a stylized reconstruction of the moment. Not the frozen image of impact, but the continuation that followed. A princess rising from smoke. Orders given. Soldiers regrouping. Ryder shifted slightly beside her, uncomfortable with the attention. You could have warned me, he muttered under his breath. I considered it, she replied without turning. Cruel. Accurate. A faint ripple of laughter moved through those closest enough to hear. Valora's expression softened. Captain Ryder Cross was listed as fallen. He was not. He endured recovery, reassignment, and silence. His survival was not celebrated. It was quiet. The holographic image dissolved into starlight. He owes this crown nothing, she continued, nor does he owe this world his continued courage. Ryder blinked once. But I will not allow his choice to remain archived as tragedy narrowly avoided. It was the beginning of something greater. She turned fully toward him now. Captain Cross, she said formally, though her eyes held something more personal, Remembrance recognizes you not as a relic of war, but as a living testament to interspecies loyalty. The memorial spire flared, and a band of light descended, not a medal, not an ornament, but a harmonic imprint woven directly into the planet's archive. It encircled Ryder briefly, then dissipated, embedding his neural signature into the foundation of Remembrance itself. He stared upward. That's, permanent, isn't it? Yes, she said softly. Subtle. You prefer spectacle? I prefer paperwork that doesn't outlive me. A ripple of laughter moved through the terrace again, lighter now. The ceremony concluded not in solemn silence, but in shared resonance. Veterans approached, some saluting, some clasping hands. Human delegates nodded with renewed confidence. Even Valorian officers who had once questioned the alliance stood a fraction straighter. Saran's fate had been decided quietly. Stripped of harmonic authority, she would face tribunal. Not exile, not execution. Valora had chosen measured justice over spectacle. Fear would not be answered with annihilation. As the crowd dispersed, the blue star began its descent toward the horizon. Ryder stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out over the silver sea. "You didn't have to do that," he said as Valora joined him. "Yes," she replied. "I did." He glanced at her. "Why?" "Because I spent 15 years believing I owed you a debt," she said calmly. "Today I realized I do not." He studied her carefully. "That's a strange way to say thank you." "It is not a debt," she continued. "It is a choice. You chose to shield me. I chose to become worthy of survival. We are not bound by obligation." He considered that, the breeze lifting his hair slightly. "And what are we bound by?" he asked. She did not answer immediately. The memorial world's ocean reflected the sky in long bands of fading blue. "Shared history," she said at last. "Mutual respect." "And inconvenient timing," he added lightly. "That as well." He shifted his weight, his shoulders stiff but manageable. "I don't want to be a symbol." "You are not." "Good. You are a man who made a decision," she said, "and who continues to make them." He exhaled slowly. "I avoided returning because I thought you'd see me as unfinished." She turned toward him fully. "You are not unfinished." "I'm patched together with lattice work and stubbornness." "Then you are resilient." He laughed quietly. "You always did argue efficiently." "I learned from effective examples." Silence settled again, but it no longer carried tension. It carried possibility. The capital ship adjusted slightly in orbit, its harmonic core steady and true. Remembrance glowed beneath them, archives secure. "I've been offered advisory reinstatement," Ryder said after a moment. "Post-sabotage. Apparently my suspicion is considered useful." Valora raised an eyebrow. "You are surprised?" "I am retired." "You are undecided." He smiled faintly. "You listen too closely." "My ears are long," she replied dryly. He shook his head once, amused. "If I accept," he said slowly, "it won't be because I owe anyone." "No," she agreed. "It will be because I choose to." Her gaze did not waver. "That is the only reason that matters." The last of the veterans departed the terrace. The memorial spire dimmed to a gentle glow. Ryder stepped closer, not in ceremony, not in obligation, simply in proximity. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "Less afraid, more honest, more dangerous." She almost smiled. "Perhaps." He looked out at the horizon one final time. 15 years ago, I thought I was saving a life." "You were." "I didn't realize I was helping create a queen." "You did not create me," she said gently. "You gave me the chance to decide who I would be." He nodded once. "And who are you now?" he asked. She looked at the world below, the preserved names, the balanced orbit, the alliance that had nearly fractured and held. "I am someone who does not rule from fear," she said, "and who no longer carries gratitude as a burden." He held her gaze, and something unspoken settled between them. Not dramatic, not explosive, but steady. "Well," he said lightly, breaking the stillness, "if you're done almost crashing planets, I was promised a viewing deck." She exhaled a soft laugh. "You persist." "I survived out of spite." "Then you will survive out of curiosity." Dangerous evolution. She extended her hand, not as queen to subject, not as debtor to savior, but as equal to equal. He looked at it for a moment, then took it. The gesture was simple. The impact was not. Above them, the capital ship's core hummed in perfect harmonic balance. Below them, Remembrance recorded the contact. The pressure, the shared neural signature, the quiet recalibration of two trajectories once separated by smoke and time. The memorial world continued its orbit, no longer on the brink of destruction, but steady. And for the first time in 15 years, neither of them felt defined by what had almost ended. They felt defined by what they chose next.